Welcome back to Grid Down Prepping at Guns America Digest. If you haven't subscribed to Guns America Digest, you should do so at gunsamerica.com/digest. Usually there are articles that go along with this video, and that will be found at griddownmag.com. And if you want the email where you get these in your inbox, usually on Mondays, there's a quarterly too, that is by subscribing to Guns America Digest. This is one of our specialty publications. America runs on propane, or I should say American campers run on propane, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the regular old Coleman stove, which I did not bring here. Now, the original Coleman stove was extremely useful because it burned white gas and was also capable of burning gasoline. You can see now, sometimes you can find them online. They have dual fuel ones that are basically the same old stove as before. They claim there's a slightly different nozzle in it or whatever. But those stoves are extremely useful for cooking indoors especially. And that's why propane, which came after those stoves, propane became a very common thing that people cook on in America. Obviously, some people cook on propane in their house. Why? Because propane burns blue. It doesn't burn yellow or orange usually. And when you see something burning blue, it means that it's burning the carbon monoxide. So it doesn't really produce any carbon monoxide, because carbon monoxide is a flammable gas. Most people don't know that. Propane burns at something like over 2,000 degrees. So it burns up all the gases that are in there. Which makes it very clean. There's no soot. You can cook directly on top. It doesn't hurt your pan. It's great stuff. The problem is that propane needs pressure containers. And that's why I've been such an advocate for storing diesel fuel and for wood, and I'm even getting into coal. And I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue to cover all that stuff because I really think that it's important that everyone understand that you can cook off-grid without propane. But today I wanted to talk about the Coleman propane stoves. In all of the no-name Chinese brands that you'll find at Walmart and all of them, they all have pretty much the same hardware these days. It's a very rudimentary burner about that big with a tube that goes through the stove. I find them to be extremely junky. You can cook on them, they work, and they're not that expensive. So it's not that if you have one, oh no, it's not good enough. It is good enough. And because it's good enough, you can use it. And they actually sell a cord similar to this guy. They sell a cord at Walmart that will allow you to run your Coleman stove off of a regular propane bottle, a 20-pound propane, instead of these guys, all right? Because these guys are about $5 a piece, and I believe they're only 1 pound. So you're paying basically $100 for a 20-pound cylinder of propane. If you buy just one of these connectors, not this one, which I'll get to, just a regular old connector that connects your propane stove to a 20-pound bottle, you'll be great. That's really all you need if you have it already, especially. If you don't have a propane stove already, that's where I think you should look at some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about here. A few weeks ago, I did this stove, okay? This is my all-fuel stove, and this will burn propane from this kind of tank. This is a high-pressure propane and butane mixture that is fairly expensive comparatively to these green guys and certainly to 20-pound tanks. But this guy, this multi-fuel stove actually has a preheater tube, so it can burn kerosene and diesel. I believe I even did paint thinner. It'll burn just about any fuel you can imagine. It failed on vegetable oil, but I've since learned that you can add stuff to vegetable oil and then it turns basically into diesel, and it probably would work in here. I'm going to get to that at some point. I will return to it. And these guys are pressure stoves. They work on, they come with this bottle, all right? And this is a standard camping fuel bottle that you can get at BRS or whatever. And it has a plastic and aluminum or steel pump. I think it's aluminum. Aluminum pump with a brass nozzle here. And that connects to this connector, okay? Now this connector is the key to it all. Because if you already bought this stove, and a lot of you did, it's a very expensive stove, don't get me wrong. If you guys already bought this multi-fuel stove, then you don't need any of these guys in the orange boxes. It's fine, it's hot enough, it is rip snorting, and it will cook, even for a few people, it will cook plenty fast on plenty, on rudimentary fuel, and it will burn just about anything, except one thing, which I'm gonna get to now. This connector is become a very flexible connector. And you see it on all of them, it's orange. And it has become kind of a universal connector that most Americans have never even seen, because they do not sell this connector stuff at Walmart. They sell the tanks, but they do not generally sell these connectors, stoves with these connectors. I'm sure there's some that screw right on top of this bottle, that screw right into the top here, these little tiny guys, and I have seen those at Walmart occasionally. The problem with those, they're very, very unstable. They're tiny, they're very unstable, and you're just as likely for your pot to go over the side as it is for you to finish making it. Now, before I get to these stoves, I'd like to hit a couple other connectors. Now, the reason that this guy is become a universal connector is because there are adapters now to adapt just about anything to it, okay? And they just screw right in, nothing fancy. This connects this kind of stove to a 20-pound propane tank. And then you'll have one that connects these green bottles. Grab one of these guys. And now they have even one that will connect to these butane cylinders, which can be very affordable when you find them cheap. They're not cheap everywhere, but on Amazon sometimes you can find cases of these guys for like $1 a can, $1.50 a can, and there's actually a good amount of fuel in them. And likewise, these are extremely easy to use. They just screw right onto your tank, and I'll show you that they fit these guys. They just screw right onto your tank, just like you would use it like this. And you just leave it on your tank until it's gone, and then it screws right into here. And that's it. And it's the same thing with the butane. The butane guy, nothing fancy. He just fits right in. There's a slot on these butane cylinders, and he just goes like that and locks in, and that's it. So with these tools, you essentially have an all-fuel stove. This little guy is an all-fuel stove. This guy with the strap across the front, with the preheater bar. You only need that preheater bar for diesel, kerosene, and things like paint thinner that you can't just throw a match in. If it's a fuel that you would normally be able to throw a match in and it goes out like diesel, it needs a preheater because it has to come up to its ignition temperature, which is usually over 150 or so. But if you're not worried about that, or you already bought one of these, then you really just need the adapters. And if you didn't buy one of those, they are pricey for sure. The cheaper option, and even if you wanted a second stove, these are great for a second stove as well. The cheaper options are these guys, and I have at least 4 or 5 different types here, like so. And the way you measure these stoves is by BTUs. So, as I've said with other stoves, the smallest one is going to be just fine for most people in most circumstances. If it's a couple of you, you're just boiling water, you're just cooking beans and rice and that kind of stuff. the littlest stove is really all you need. Then it's just a matter of area, of burner area. And you can see just by looking at the stoves how much burner area there is. There's some of these that have a lot of little burners on them. There's some that have one big burner in the middle, one small burner in the middle. They're rated by BTU size. And I can open a few more of these. This one has 3 small burners. And I'm actually going to use this for a project that I'm doing maybe for next week. We'll see. It's an exploding corn popper. This guy's it's a nice little stove. They're really all nice stoves. And sometimes the price is a little bit different based on the material that they're made out of also. These are all pretty much stainless steel stoves. There's some brass on some of them. Like here's the same size stove, but in a single brass nozzle. And some of these will even be the similar BTUs. It's just what was being made. Oh, and the other thing that you should check for is if it has its own ignition system. All right, some do. Click, click, click. Okay, this one does, and some do not. These may all have it. No, I don't think the big one has it. Like this guy does not have its own ignition system. You need matches for that, okay? So that may be a factor when you're buying them also, that whether it has its own ignition system or not. This is another stove, another small stove that has one single burner. And this also has an ignition clicking system. So those are the factors, is that this guy is probably a less BTU stove, but it's spread out around so that you're getting it more to the edges of the pot because it has an empty middle. Whereas this guy with the brass thing has a lot of holes. And all of these stoves are at sbhardware.com. That is the companion site to Grid Down Magazine, where I arrange to have all this stuff in the country and ready to ship out immediately or close to immediately as soon as they can get it out the door to you. That's part of why I'm doing this, is because I wanted everyone to see things that are available. In the past, I've kind of linked out to eBay. I've linked out to sellers in China. You know, back when I was doing Prepping 101, it was very common that I would link to sellers in China. And these days, you know, we could see missiles coming from China any day. You know, who knows what's going to happen right now? And it's anybody's guess what happens right now. But so I've tried to concentrate on things that I know are here and that you can buy now. And because now is the important thing. That's propane. I'll see you next time.